I read, study, because the first thing a black man must have is respect for himself, respect his body and his mind. We've taken the white man's poisons into his body. His cigarettes, his dope, his liquor, his white woman, his thoughts, words, not no hustle. I'm gonna tell you, God is black.
God is black. Everybody knows God is white.
Everything the white man taught you, you accepted. He taught you you were a black heathen, and you believed it. He taught you to worship a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus with white skin, and you believed it. He taught you that black was a curse, and you believe that. Did you ever look up the word black in a dictionary?
For what?
Did you ever study anything that wasn't part of some con?
What the hell for?
In the words of my role model and our great ancestor, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz Omawale, education is the passport to the future. For tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. This video highlights a major key component and what makes not only the dynamic of who I am as a man, but why we as black people in general should stress the value and importance of education to ourselves individually, to our children, and to our people collectively. I'm not speaking about only just a formal education. For as you can see in the background, you see some of my pictures highlight some of my degrees, some of my diplomas. It goes up from elementary school all the way to my bachelor's degree in information technology. But what I'm speaking on is valuing the true essence of education that liberates your mind and enhances your spirit. As you saw in the beginning clip, you saw Malcolm X in prison being lectured by who will be his mentor. Now in the movie, they call him Bangs. But if you read the autobiography of Malcolm X clearly points out that it was Bimby who gave him the insight and also made a huge impression upon him that allowed Malcolm to eventually recapture his essence of education. We're talking about a man who dropped out of the 8th grade, who went through the streets of Boston and Harlem, lived the street life, and when he arrived in prison, he was so vindictive and evil that his cellmates named him Satan. But once Bimby put something on his mind that gave him the foresight of escaping prison of your mind, this enabled Brother Malcolm to get into these books and eventually become the iconic and highly intellectual Malcolm X that we know and that we revere. What did Malcolm X study? What did Malcolm X start off with in his quest of pursuing his self-education? He started out with a book that many of us begin with when we enter elementary school. Nowadays we take it for granted because we believe that the only thing we have to do is Google and they give us the precise definition. What Malcolm studied in prison, he took his book right here, the dictionary, and started from page 1. Page 1, aardvark. What Malcolm would do is day after day after day, he would take one page out of the dictionary, read every word out of that page, write every word out of that page, and then he would read it and recite it to himself so that when he went to the next page the very next day, he knew every single word and definition of the previous page that he had studied the day before. The brother self-educated himself just by utilizing the dictionary, which gave him the foresight and the motivation to begin to engross himself in other studies of education. Things such as science, politics, philosophy, religion, ethics, so forth and so on. Malcolm X was so committed to re-educating himself, first mentally, spiritually, and also physically. Malcolm reinvented himself. That he would take anywhere between 12 to 15 hours each day by studying. And on Malcolm's own accord, he admitted in his autobiography that he had never felt so free while in prison due to him just reading and studying and embracing the true essence of education.
This was written by white folks, though, right? This white folks book.
This sure ain't no black man's book.
So what are we reading this one for?
Because the truth is right there. If you read behind the words, you got to take everything the white man says and use it against him.
There's a whole lot of words in there.
Here, let's start at the beginning. We'll look them up, write them down, find out what they mean. Page 1. The first word, you take one step forward.
And for me personally, I can relate to what Malcolm had to undergo when he was in prison. For many of you who don't know my background, I grew up with a speech impediment problem. I did not begin to speak or enunciate words until I was nearly 5 years old. From the age of 3 until the age of 11 or 12, I was placed in special education at the school I graduated from. But one thing I did while I was in that school, I valued self-education. For example, I remember as a kid, I would say I was about 7 or 8 when I first began to do this. I remember when I would take all of my books from my class, and I would take all of my books home for the entire weekend, and I would make up assignments for every single course of study, and then I would write these assignments out. I would read certain passages from certain books I had to read, and then I would do my own homework, which allowed me to, by the time I got to the 6th grade, I was doing reading and math at a 9th, 10th grade level. I never looked at special education as a deferment. I never looked at special education holding me back from achieving what I knew I could achieve in life. Special education for me was a blessing because it allowed me to put myself on the course to read, study, be educated, develop my own form of intelligence, and have insight and to conduct research and not just depend on what was told to me, but for every book I read at least 5 more just to fully acknowledge and understand the truth that I read for one book. This was the result of me self-educating myself from 7 to about 14. So by the time I started creating hip-hop music, the reason why you hear Abdullah, the lyricist, as very intellectual, very lyrical, very consonant of who he is and what he represents, the reason why I am the way that I am as a lyricist in the MC is because this all began through my usage of education and valuing education, valuing reading, valuing studying, knowing what I read and studied, and to have a critical analysis and cognitive dissonance of what it was that I read. One true component of acquiring an education is to have some form of self-improvement. Books like these, which goes into full detail of having improvement for self, developing the knowledge of self, retraining and reinvigorating that true knowledge that you have within yourself, that you know that is crying out for you to bring to the forefront. It resonates a great feeling of the highest sense of the human being that Allah has created. So what I'm saying is, when you value education, you value the highest form of your intellectual capacity. You make yourself brighter and smarter as a person. This is why I look up to Brother Malcolm so much. If you notice in all of my videos, Malcolm X is the most used person to utilize certain points that I want to emphasize. Reason being, because he comes from an environment that I grew up in. But he did not allow that the environment to distract him from being the wonderful human being that God himself aligned for Malcolm to be. And I look at my own life in that regard. And you should view your own self as well. Not only just reading books by Malcolm, but books such as Shahrazad Ali. There are wonderful and brilliant black women who have intellectual minds, who are very eloquent, not only when they speak, but their actions dictate who they are as a result of their intelligence. Not formal education in the sense of they just went to college and gained a degree. No. But education in the sense of this is my life's mission. I have to continue to read and study and gain new forms of information, regardless of the old information that I've previously learned and mastered. In the book, Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey strongly makes an emphasis, not only for us that belong in the UNIA, but for all Africans worldwide, to totally engross themselves into at least 4 hours of reading each and every day. What do you gain when you have a lot of this reading? For one, you improve your vocabulary. You have no idea of how refreshing and fascinating it is to have an expansive vocabulary, so that when you speak to people, or when you go on podcasts, or when people invite you to come to certain platforms, you're able to elaborate and speak to people in a manner that not only will they be able to understand, but they are intrigued and also inspired by your own intelligence.
The system is designed to make the Negro student lose his interest in education almost before he even gets started in school. And the parents, usually, who are also limited where education is concerned, and who have run into so many barriers and obstacles despite the fact they had education, sometimes they ask themselves, what's the survival of it? Depends upon the continued degrading of the black man in this country, and the necessity of using us as the whipping boy and the alibi and the excuse. As long as this system exists, then you will find that our people will have the same attitude toward education.
Intelligence should be valued at a level to where not only are you just reading and studying and you milking all this information in your mind, but look at this. This is pages upon pages of just notes that I write down whenever I read a certain book. Not only do I highlight it, I write it down, and then I reread it to myself so that I have a more thorough understanding of what it is that I've read. This is the result of us utilizing education for our own personal benefit. Education will take us a long way in life. You don't necessarily have to have a degree in order to acquire education. Reading books and doing research and learning learning geographical maps and so forth and so on, it will build a person who is at the lowest rings of society, and it will over time gradually elevate that person into a dignified, respectful, responsible, and inspiring person. I place a great emphasis on education so much that I lead by example. My 11-year-old son, he has been on a high honor rolls in his school for the past 4 years. And the reason why he has been on the high honor roll is because ever since my son was 2 years old, I made it my mission to instill in my son that he had to grasp and conquer the concept of reading and studying. I remember when my son was 1 year old, he saw me reading the Final Call newspaper. You know what my son did? My son grabbed the newspaper from me and began to read it. He didn't know what he was reading, but he read it because he saw that his dad was so enamored with this paper and these words that he wanted to do what his daddy did. Education is something that we as black people always strive to obtain. We have to remember, we live in a country where for over 300 plus years, your former slave master deprived you and denied you the right to read. If you read Frederick Douglass's autobiography, he realized that the moment he began to read, he knew instantly that he was no longer a slave. Not only did Frederick Douglass recognize that, but the slave master also knew that he couldn't contain this anymore because he was a freed man in his mind. In conclusion, black people, we should take the value and true essence of education very seriously. We should not continue to allow ourselves to engage in ignorance. We should not humiliate ourselves to the lowest form of degradation and debauchery all over social media. We should not be looking at Hollywood celebrities and these entertainers as someone that we should strive to be. No. We should take advantage of the opportunities we have before us. No one is stopping us in 2021 from becoming doctors, lawyers, scientists, engineers, technicians, IT. Even construction workers, electricians, so forth and so on, blue collar workers. They have to have some form of education. They have to utilize math, science, and all of these things in order to do their jobs correctly. That's another aspect of having education. Because not only do you go to school to acquire a form of education, but you can utilize a trade by working with your hands. Trust me, the essence of education, by you utilize your hands, you become a builder and producer. That's what education details, because of the simple fact, when you utilize your hands, you have to utilize both your mind and you have a vivid imagination and creation at the same time. That's what education really means. We need to utilize the essence of education into changing the psychology of our people at large. The masses of black people are still deprived of intelligence. The masses of black people still dwell in ignorance. And it is up to us, or what they would call the 5%ers, to raise our people out of the mud and put them on the level of righteousness through the use of education that the Most High himself will be proud of, because that's what the Most High intended for us to be. Let's use education to the greatest of our ability. First, as an individual person, allow your true intelligence, your hard work, your charisma, and your academia trickle down to others, that they can make good use of it so that we can continue to grow and elevate ourselves as a nation of Africans. We are the true essence of education because we're builders and creators. We have to bring it out within us. And the only way we do that is by having the proper discipline and structure. To wake up, have a set focus and goal in mind, and just read. Just read. Take advantage of what the slave master refused to allow you to do, because even the slave master knows. Once the slave begins to utilize himself and equip himself with knowledge, he will no longer remain a slave, and he will be free and independent to build himself up mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, and intellectually. In the way that's possible, by valuing the true essence of education. Peace and love, and may God bless each and every last one of you. One love.
Read, study lessons and build your inner power. The value of education means life to me. Read, study lessons and build your inner power. The value of education means life to me. Read, study lessons and build your inner power. The value of education means life to me. Read, study lessons and build your inner power. The value of education means life to me.
By how I hip hop on the mic and right, on the mic and right. By how I hip